Hello and welcome to That British Homestead. Today, well, we're going to tackle that tomato forest and do some vertical gardening. So let's get started. Okay, so starting off, this is an indeterminate variety, which means it's a vining type. So it grows and grows and grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, and you get tons of tomatoes off of it. There is a determinate type of tomato. If I see one around, it's a bush type. They do not grow and grow and grow. Something like Roma, they will grow to a certain height and then they will just bush out and produce lots of tomatoes. Okay, do not trim them because you'll get less tomatoes. These ones I've got to trim on the basis that we are in England. I'm just outside London, so we're in zone 9A, but these ones will not ripen unless you trim them. Okay, you're probably thinking, why are you using kitchen scissors? And that's because I still can't find any of my gardening tools because I've been a scattered brain and I've organised them away at all costs, always. Also, I will show you this because it's absolutely breathtaking. Look at them. And you can make them talk. I used to do that as a kid and we used to talk to each other with them. And I'm very interested, aren't I? So this is a beautiful tomato here. It is a plum variety, you can see down there. It's absolutely covered in tomatoes, but it is also needing to sit up straight. Okay, so it's got two stems on this, which is fun. So we're going to first attach this one, like so. Now you don't want to over trim. You don't want to over trim this time of year because if you do, you get sunburn. You don't want sunburn. So let's move you. You can see. Right. So this is a tomato, right? This is the main stem that runs up there. The really thick one is the main stem. Whereas this one, do you see how it's coming out of the armpit? Yeah. So this is a leaf. Let's move the foliage. So this one here goes up there is a leaf, and then this is the main stem, and then this one is a runner, sucker, or clone, and you just trim it. Now, these will produce tomatoes, so they're not just leaves, and you can see there's loads and loads of flowers on there, okay, which is great. However, if you have a very long climate or really warm climate, you can let these bad boys go and they'll be fine, but we don't. We've got to cut them off. If you put that into water, it will actually root and you can give it away as a tomato plant. Anything that is touching the ground has to go because of blight. We don't want anything trying to promote this plant getting sick. So anything that's touching the floor is gone. You don't want to take too many of the lower branches off now because of the fact that it is fruiting. Yeah, that can come out too. Now, there is another one that's coming off the main stem here. All tangled up. There we go, it's going really well. I'm just going to take this one off that's touching the floor. And there's one more that's touching the floor. This one can be stopped touching the floor by just simply pinning it up. After taking the runners off, it'll be easier. You don't want to tie these too tight on the basis that these will grow, and as they grow they will produce So you don't want to tie them too tight, on the basis that as they grow, the stems will get thicker, obviously, to incorporate the more fruit. And as they get bigger and thicker, the issue will be that they get kind of strangled by the rope or the string or the cable tie, whatever you're using, and they will become really weak and bend over. We don't want that, because especially the bigger tomatoes will be a massive issue. So aren't they beautiful though? I think they look an absolute beautiful tomato. I'm really excited about these. We don't have very many tomatoes at the moment. Like, most of them are just coming on. But these are very beautiful, and I'm really excited about them. They're going to be plum tomato varieties, which is great. I do can all of these tomatoes. I know you're meant to grow special canning tomatoes, but I think the flavour's nicer. Does it have more water? Yeah, but I don't mind a watery sauce, because I put so many vegetables in it that it's like ridiculous. I'm like, forget about your 5-a-day, I'm going for a 10-a-day, because my family don't really like vegetables, so I have to trick them into eating them, as we do with all small children, and sadly my partner too. Tomatoes are my favourite things to grow. Even though they're like a little bit more high maintenance than other plants, they're probably my favourite harvest and the favourite thing. I don't know, them and garlic, they're like two different spectrums. Tomatoes are like all high maintenance, and garlics are like incredibly low maintenance, but I'm like most excited about both of them, probably because I use them together, and I love tomato sauces. So let's have a look at this one. So, and it, once again, anything that's touching the floor is gone. I getting absolutely tons of volunteer tomato plants as well, which sounds really good until you realise that there's a little one there. It's really good until you realise that they're like this big and absolutely useless. So you got to be careful. Once you've started growing them for a little while, then you realise how many you get. So I've got it to 2 stems, which is fine. You can get rid of all of these. So it's split here into 2. I might just cut this one off. This is not the main stem, okay? The main stem's here, it's just branched. So that's coming off. Sometimes when they divide like this and the actual stem divides into 2, I'll show you what I mean. Do you see what I mean here, where the stem's kind of mutated? You get this a lot with heirloom varieties, and it's just got extra thick and then split into 2. It can be confusing, but as I only want 2 stems, and this one's really well established and has flowers that are well established on them, we'll keep that one. And this is a bigger, I think it's going to be a much bigger variety. That is a beefsteak variety, which is exciting. So I'm just going to take that one off as well because it's touching the floor. You don't want them, so you don't want anything touching the floor on the basis that you have blight in the floor and you've got diseases, and if you get the soil splashed up, you're more likely to get diseases. So you want a nice clear space between the plant and the floor in an ideal world. So that one's standing up all right on its own. I'm not going to bother trellising it. I'm just going to let it be. Every tomato that you grow is different from each other, and you never know what you're going to get until suddenly you're faced with it. I mean, look at this bad boy. I mean, where do you begin? Right, let's say this is the main stem. So this one's got to come off. You're looking at the sky. So this is the main stem, okay, because it's the thickest one. So therefore this one's got to come off. Gotta be cruel to be kind. This one. This one. I'm going to try to keep the 2 suckers with the biggest tomatoes on, so this is going to have to go. That that one's going to go because it's only a little weedy one. Alright, so that's gone. Which makes this one go. Sorry, sorry mate. This is a different tomato plant altogether. And this one can go too. And this one. That's a total different tomato plant. So that's good. These can go. This one can go. And this one can go. So all of the small ones here, look, little armpit ones can go. What's this? This one can go because it is in the armpit again. Perfect. Now, the tomatoes grow off the stem. Okay, so that's important that you don't cut those off because obviously you won't get any tomatoes. Oh, this steak is rubbish. Wait there for a second. I like to go around the base and hold that up first so it gets like a good foundation. So just move the tomato fruit one side and then I'm just going to link that over like so. Once again, not doing it too tight. And then the last one, this one's a really good one to show you. So as you can see, main stem goes down there and this one is growing out the armpit. This one is growing off the main stem, meaning it's flowers. We want to keep the flowers. This is what makes it so rewarding. Tomatoes, tomatoes. Nice handful there. It's madness in this bit. Right, let's continue. So there's 5 main reasons why we could really benefit from trellising our tomatoes. So number 1 would be to optimise space. Now, if you aren't trellising your tomatoes, growing them vertically, then you are going to miss out on some of really great space-saving area, because if you're in like a small garden or you have like a small balcony, etc., then you really want to get like your bang for your buck when it comes to space. If you grow them vertically, then you can actually grow them 1 foot apart, and a foot is 30 centimeters, but roughly the size of your foot. That's how I do it anyway. Especially if you're a size 9, then it actually means that you are about the size of a foot. So if you do have a small garden, etc., you do want to grow them vertically because it maximises your space. But if you get something like Gardener's Delight, which is a variety of tomato, then you get a massive yield of your tomatoes as well. I personally like to have the heirloom varieties. Yes, you get a little bit less of a yield, but once again, you do want to grow those vertically because they are so susceptible to diseases. For example, you've got blight, which is going to be awful. I'll explain what blight is later, but when it comes to heirloom varieties, they do struggle with blight. Also, heirloom varieties, especially the big lovely yellow ones, will split very eagerly when it comes to being too rained on, so you can keep an eye out for them ripening up and take them off before a good rain. So that's a really, really, really big advantage there. The next one is another really important one. It links very closely to the one before, and that's air circulation. Now, any vining plant, such as tomatoes, will have an issue with airflow because their foliage just goes everywhere and they trap air and limit the airflow in there, which is the perfect breeding ground for diseases and fungal infections, which is not fantastic. So when you're trellising your tomatoes, you are basically ventilating them. Like we have vents in our house, you want to make sure that there's airflow constantly through those tomatoes, which will reduce mold and blight spores, etc., that are able to settle down and do damage to your plant. Good airflow helps pollinators as well, because it's easier for a pollinator to find its way through to your tomato plants than it is for when they're all overgrown. Additionally to that, you will find that the amount of blossom end rot that you have will be reduced because you'll be able to water where the roots are. And blossom end rot is basically lack of watering, or the water's not getting to the plants. Okay, especially if you spend all the time watering over grown foliage, it might not actually get to the roots, so you might be getting blossom end rot because of that. Lots of people say it's calcium related. It could be. It's always very exciting and very good idea to go ahead and make sure that you have your soil tested, but most of the time it is the fact that you're not watering, or you're leaving such big gaps between your watering that the water just runs off the soil because it becomes something called hydrophobic, which means that it no longer is able to absorb water. So you make sure you water twice. If in doubt, water twice is my motto. So sun exposure as well. As we all know, tomatoes absolutely love sunshines. They love heat and they love sunshines. Okay, so they grow really well in like the Mediterranean. We talk about the Mediterranean diets, and they are like full of tomatoes, aren't they? They're delicious, but full of tomatoes, and that's because they have such wonderful sunshine over there. But to kind of like help out our English tomatoes, we take away some of the foliage of that so that the sun can get to them and they don't have so many suckers, because the suckers will develop tons and tons and tons of growth but not necessarily flowers. So we want the foliage to concentrate that energy on ripening them tomatoes and having that intense flavour that you can only get from homegrown tomatoes. Am I right? The next is easy plant maintenance. Now, as I'm pruning back my tomatoes, I'm finding loads of actual red tomatoes. I think it was 3 times I found them, and I had no idea where they were there because the foliage was so dense. And it's so much easier to be able to find and pick your tomatoes when they're in the optimal conditions, when you're able to go ahead and look at the tomatoes themselves and actually find them and see them easily. In addition to that, it helps with pruning, okay? So it's easier to prune a plant that is well pruned and vertical than trailing all over the floor. You can see I'm really struggling here. Luckily, I had that rule of thumb of finding the thickest stem, which is the main one, and then removing anything that's not flowering or not growing active fruit on there. But really, it's going to be easier if I do this, not even weekly, but bi-weekly. It would be fantastic. Watering, we've already spoken to. It's easier to water a plant that's vertical and well trimmed than it is to water a tomato jungle, which I basically had. And harvesting, of course, is way easier, and the fruit's not going to split, especially when you get them beautiful heirloom varieties. And I think, guys, that's basically why, that's why I grow. I don't want to speak for you. That's why I grow vegetables. Is to have the really strange varieties that you can't get in the shops, which is really, really important. Additionally, you can find issues super easy. I've grown tomatoes vertically in my home garden, and I saw that they had blight, and through trimming them and making sure that I was actively looking after my plant, I did somehow manage to prevent the blight taking the plant for long enough to harvest pretty much most of them tomatoes off of, I think it was 6 plants I was growing. So that was really good. Now, that will be much easier if you have a trimmed and vertical garden than if you have them growing everywhere, which is much harder to do. Additionally, harvesting is so much easier when you can just like walk over and pick a tomato instead of having to like bend down and search through loads of vines. I know I did it last year. We all remember that, and it was quite difficult. You also get happier plants, and some people like to have fruit that's not blemished as much. As I've told you, I grow a load of heirloom varieties. You're going to have cat facing, you're going to have stuff like that. That's where you get little brown marks on it. I dare say I'm going to show you some probably incredibly soon as my beefsteak tomatoes start being developed, but I'm okay with that. But some people want really smooth, perfect, healthy, straight fruit that don't have any blemishes on them. Now, if you're going to go and take your fruit to a fair, the one that we did last year, you get better marks if you don't have any blemishes on them, so that is something to bear in mind. And also, like I said, it just prevents resistance and pests and airborne diseases splashing up onto your plants, which makes them much happier for much longer. So you're actually able to grow your plants for a much longer time period, which means you'll have a greater harvest. Now, we are quite dependent on our lovely tomato plants for growing all of our tomato sauces, etc., that we have throughout the year. Now, since I've been growing tomatoes, I've been able to do that with my tomato plants. I started off with 6 plants, and we just kind of like, as we get more and more of them, we eat more tomato-based products. So if it is that I don't get very many, then that's okay. We'll just eat less tomato sauces and stuff like that over the years. So it's not the end of the world. It's not like I'm going to starve or anything, because I live next to Asda, Tesco's and Sainsbury's, Lidl and Aldi. So I'm not going to, don't worry too much about me starving. But I have to say that I do like to eat fresh tomatoes, so it is really lovely to have those like on tap. And sometimes when I go to meetings at work, I will literally bring a massive bag of tomatoes, and I'll sit in a meeting and just munch all the way through them. And I'm very well known for doing that because we have so many, and sometimes I just bring a little baggie of tomatoes, and then it's like a really healthy snack. And I think with all the different colours and stuff, I think they're very beneficial. They must be. Like, in my head, I'm like, well, a red tomato has everything it needs to be a red tomato, but a green tomato and, for example, a yellow tomato must be different, must have different minerals and stuff. So what I am also doing is I am removing some of these tomato plants, and I look like I'm absolutely butchering them, but there is some benefits. You could use anything, by the way, for a trellis. As you can see, I'm using bamboo canes. I'm also using rebar. I way prefer the rebar, but it is much more expensive than a cane. The canes are good for a year or two, then they do sort of break apart, which is quite annoying. I'm using twine here just to go ahead and trellis up the plants. Now, twine is one of those things that I just inherited. When I got the allotment, I didn't buy it. It was just here. So I've not really invested anything into this twine, and to be honest, I'll just go ahead and pull it off every year, and then I will go ahead and reuse it if I can. So it's very good to have things that left over in the allotment. Never throw anything away is my motto, and then go ahead and try to use it wherever you can. Some of these things, some of them, like the one by my foot, does have a stake, but it's actually a determinate variety, so it's actually not going to vine. It turns into a little bush, and it's one of the first ones that produce. I believe it is Tumbling Tom. So it is quite exciting to have that one. So I just will go ahead and pull out the stakes and things like that from it, because why is it that I need a stake when it's not going to grow much taller than it is? I'm also getting tons and tons and tons of tomatoes that are volunteering, because I grew tomatoes here last year. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I am going ahead and removing all of those, basically. As you can see, some of the tomatoes look like they have a disease on them. They don't. They're old leaves. They do need a bit of a fertiliser. We here use granule fertiliser, which will break down slowly over time. So obviously it's run out of its granule fertiliser at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm going to go ahead and get some more of that on there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.